variation is a characteristic of language. There is more than one way of saying the same thing. Speakers may vary pronunciation, word choice, or morphology and syntax. But while the diversity of variation is great, there seem to be boundaries on variation. Euro speakers do not generally make drastic alterations in sentence word order or use novel sounds that are completely foreign to the language being spoken. Language variation does not equate with language ungrammaticality, but speakers are still sensitive to what is and is not possible in their native tongue. Language variation is a core concept in sociolinguistics. Sociolinguists investigate whether this linguistic variation can be attributed to differences in the social characteristics of the speakers using the language, but also investigate whether elements of the surrounding linguistic context promote or inhibit the usage of certain structures. Studies of language variation and its correlation with sociological categories, such as William Laboff's 1963 paper The Social Motivation of a Sound Change, led to the foundation of sociolinguistics as a subfield of linguistics. Although contemporary sociolinguistics includes other topics, language variation and change remains an important issue at the heart of the field. Sociolinguistic variables. Studies in the field of sociolinguistics typically take a sample population and interview them, assessing the realization of certain sociolinguistic variables. Laboff specifies the ideal sociolinguistic variable to be high in frequency, have a certain immunity from conscious suppression, be an integral part of larger structures, and be easily quantified on a linear scale. Phonetic variables tend to meet these criteria and are often used as amorphosyntactic variables, morphophonological variables, and, more rarely, lexical variables. Examples for phonetic variables are the frequency of the glottal stop, the height or backness of a vowel, or the realization of word endings. An example of a morphosyntactic variable is the frequency of negative concord. Two well-known and frequently studied morphophonological variables are TD deletion, the optional deletion of the sound or at the end of a word, as in I kept walking, and the ing variable, the optional pronunciation of ing at the end of a word as in I kept walking. Analysis and methodology. Analyzing sociolinguistic variation often involves the use of statistical programs to handle its multivariable nature. One essential part of the methodology is to count up the number of tokens of a particular variant and compare it to the number of times the variant could have occurred. This is called the principle of accountability integral Monty. Comparing the tokens to the total number of words in a corpus or comparing one corpus to another leads to erroneous results. This count of the possible occurrences can be difficult at times because some variants alternate with zero. Variation associated with age. There are several different types of age-based variation one may see within a population. They are, vernacular of a subgroup with membership typically characterized by a specific age range, age-graded variation, and indications of linguistic change in progress. One example of subgroup vernacular is the speech of street youth. Just as street youth dress differently from the norm, they also often have their own language. The reasons for this are the following: to enhance their own cultural identity, to identify with each other, to exclude others, and to invoke feelings of fear or admiration from the outside world. Strictly speaking, this is not truly age-based, since it does not apply to all individuals of that age bracket within the community. Age-graded variation is a stable variation which varies within a population based on age. That is, speakers of a particular age will use a specific linguistic form in successive generations. This is relatively rare. J.K. Chambers cites an example from southern Ontario, Canada, where the name of the letter Z varies. Most of the English-speaking world pronounces it Z. However, in the United States, it is pronounced Z. A linguistic survey found that in 1979 2/3 of the 12-year-olds in Toronto ended the recitation of the alphabet with the letter Z, where only 8% of the adults did so. Then in 1991, a survey showed only 39% of the 20 to 25-year-olds used Z. In fact, the survey showed that only 12% of those over 30 used the form Z. This seems to be tied to an American children's song frequently used to teach the alphabet. In this song, the rhyme scheme matches the letter Z with VV, prompting the use of the American pronunciation. As the individual grows older, this marked form Z is dropped in favor of the standard form Z. People tend to use linguistic forms that were prevalent when they reached adulthood. So, in the case of linguistic change in progress, one would expect to see variation over a broader range of ages. William Bright provides an example taken from American English, where in certain parts of the country there is an ongoing merger of the vowel sounds in such pairs of words as court and cot. Examining the speech across several generations of a single family, one would find the grandparents' generation would never or rarely merge these two vowel sounds. Their children's generation may on occasion, particularly in quick or informal speech. While their grandchildren's generation would merge these two vowels uniformly. This is the basis of the apparent time hypothesis, where age-based variation is taken as an indication of linguistic change in progress. Variation associated with geography. A commonly studied source of variation is regional dialects. Dialectology studies variations in language based primarily on geographic distribution and their associated features. Sociolinguists concerned with grammatical and phonological features that correspond to regional areas are often called dialectologists. Variation associated with gender. Men and women, on average, tend to use slightly different language styles. These differences tend to be quantitative rather than qualitative. That is, to say that women use a particular speaking style more than men do is akin to saying that men are taller than women. The initial identification of a women's register was by Robin Lockoff in 1975, who argued that the style of language served to maintain women's role in society. A later refinement of this argument was that gender differences in language reflected a power difference. However, both these perspectives have the language style of men as normative, implying that women's style is inferior. More recently, Deborah Tannen has compared gender differences in language as more similar to cultural differences. Comparing conversational goals, she argued that men have a report style, aiming to communicate factual information, whereas women have a rapport style, more concerned with building and maintaining relationships. Such differences are pervasive across media, including face-to-face conversation, written essays of primary school children, email, and even toilet graffiti. Communication styles are always a product of context, and as such, gender differences tend to be most pronounced in single-gender groups. One explanation for this is that people accommodate their language towards the style of the person they are interacting with. Thus, in a mixed-gender group, gender differences tend to be less pronounced. A similarly important observation is that this accommodation is usually towards the language style, not the gender of the person. That is, a polite and empathic male will tend to be accommodated to on the basis of their being polite and empathic, rather than their being male. See also, dialect, language change, speech community, variable rules analysis, variety. Explanatory notes. Citations. Works consulted, University of Pennsylvania. Circa 2005. Phonological Atlas of North America, Map 1.